Good to have you with us on this Monday edition, Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Of course, the game was fantastic. And the interview is somewhat of a blockbuster, too. Bill O'Reilly saying that Vladimir Putin's a killer, and then Trump defending the Russian president. And then in an admission that I've never heard from any other president that we kill too. I mean, that's basically what Trump was saying. I mean, the guy just wades into things that every day he's a media firestorm. Lots of tweets about this on Capitol Hill. Marco Rubio says, we're not like Putin. When was the last time we poisoned our opponents? I mean, it's just going back and forth. The Kremlin has asked for an apology from Fox News. Meanwhile, it was an active weekend before that. The president on Friday going after executive orders curtailing financial regulation. Today, on Monday, he did that. But, of course, on Friday, he was being thwarted by some court action when it comes to immigration. House Democrats this day blasted Trump's executive orders calling curtailing financial regulation, arguing that the White House wants to bring back the days leading up to the 2008 financial crisis. He wants to gut Dodd-Frank, although he has asked lawmakers to go back and come back in 30 days and tell them what's good and what's bad about Dodd-Frank. It constantly seems like Donald Trump is winging it. Today he spoke at Central Command down in Florida saying that we're going to beat the terrorists, and also said that NATO has to live up to its financial obligations. Now, there's two huge stories right there. Told the military they're going to get whatever they want, that new equipment is on the way. He won't stand for anything else. And so every time the guy opens his mouth, he's a story. Bob Shrum, Democratic Strategist, professor at USC. Bob, nice to have you with us again.
Glad to be here, Ed.
It's a news cycle that, in fact, I even spoke with a couple of lawmakers last week in Washington. One of them, Kevin Kramer from North Dakota, after the Dakota Access Pipeline was given the green light. I spoke to the North Dakota congressman. I said, well, how would you characterize the first 10 days of Trump? He says, we're having a hard time keeping up with him. I mean, what do you make of what's going on?
Nothing like this has ever occurred in the history of the presidency. I can't think of a modern president, or for that matter, any president, who's ever approached his job this way. He seems to be making it up as he goes along. The executive orders are not properly vetted. They're not run through the channels they're normally run through. That's why his order, for example, on immigration is in such trouble. We'll see where the courts go with it. But in terms of this financial regulation, I don't think we should be surprised. It may be that the process is incoherent. It may turn out to be a mess over time. But and I'm a little doubtful even about that, because Gary Cohn, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, who's in charge of it, I think will try to make sure it's orderly. But this should not surprise us. Trump may have gone out and railed against Wall Street. He ran ads at the end of the campaign in which he attacked Lloyd Blankfein, the president of Goldman Sachs, and then as soon as he becomes president, starts appointing major folks from Goldman Sachs to important positions. In that sense, he is a Republican. He may be a disruptor on trade. He may be a disruptor on other issues, but he's a rock-solid Republican who's hostile to regulation and who's going to, I think, dismember a lot of Dodd-Frank and a lot of the protections that were put in place so we wouldn't have another 2008.
What about GlassSteagall? I keep hearing that there's a possibility that he could reinstate that, which would separate the investment banks from the commercial banks. I don't know where that is. Bernie Sanders doesn't buy it. He says that Trump's a fraud. So I guess every day is like Russian roulette, for lack of a better term, huh, Bob?
Look, I don't think GlassSteagall is going to get reinstated, although he promised it during the campaign. It's not going to get reinstated because it's contrary to the whole spirit of what he's done with these executive orders on Dodd-Frank. It would have a very hard time passing this Republican Congress. Even some Democrats might not vote for it. And I just think Trump's not going to go down that road. One of the things he's doing that is staggering is he's put a halt to, and I think they'll ultimately just get rid of it, the so-called fiduciary rule, which says that investment advisors have to give advice which is in the best interests of their clients.
Yeah.
But they can't give the clients intentionally bad advice. Now, that seems like the most commonsensical thing in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But and it's there for a reason. Leading up to the financial crises, you had investment banks that were shorting various instruments because they thought they were worthless and they were going to collapse, and at the same time they were selling them to their customers. That ought to be against the law.
Well, of course, that brought us the mortgage meltdown, and it just almost destroyed the economy. We had to do a stimulus package to get things going again and spend a bunch of money doing that, which was controversial in itself. I think that Trump has done 18 executive orders in 12 days. I don't think there's ever been a president that has ever done that. And I think you're right when you say we should be surprised. We knew he was a man of action, that he was going to do something. We just didn't know exactly how fast and what all he was going to do. But the Democratic strategy right now, Bob, what is it? Right now, the Democrats have the filibuster, and that's it. Trump has already satisfied the right wing with this Supreme Court nominee, and this guy is probably going to get confirmed by the Senate and put on the Supreme Court. So from that perspective, and he met with a bunch of pro-life people, organizations at the latter part of last week before going to Florida. So he's given the rabbit want a conservative court and satisfying them. So where are the Democrats? The biggest soundbite that's out there right now is that Nancy Pelosi wants the FBI to get engaged and investigate Donald Trump and his ties with Russia. And I guess I thought, well, didn't we do that during where was all this concern about that when he was running for president for 18 months? What is the Democratic strategy, you think?
Well, first of all, the Russian thing should have become much more visible during the campaign. I think President Obama was reluctant to politicize or look like he was politicizing that kind of intelligence investigation. And I think there was an assumption on the part of the Clinton campaign, the president, and frankly, lots of us, that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. So I don't think that the White House calculated that they needed to do this. I think Democrats are gathering themselves to fight back, but you're right, they don't have a lot of tools to do it with. It's very clear to me that if they attempt to filibuster the Gorsuch Supreme Court nomination, that Mitch McConnell is simply going to abolish the filibuster for Supreme Court appointments. And he may then, if he has trouble with some of the legislation, abolish it for legislation as well, which would turn the Senate into a kind of shrunken version of the House of Representatives. So what Democrats have to do, I think, for the long term, is you got to fight him on this stuff, you've got to make a record, and you have to get ready for the midterm elections. One of the things that I thought President Obama did a very good job in the 8 years, but one of the things he did not do well was plan for, organize for, raise money for, and fight out those midterm elections.
No.
And we have some tough odds against us in 2018. For example, Democrats have 25 Senate seats up, Republicans have 8. But you've got to go into that election, and you've got to do absolutely everything you can to hold those seats, to gain 3 more so that you can control the Senate. And that requires that you, day after day after day, hold them to account and make a record. Now, some things, by the way, are becoming difficult on the merits per se. I mean, the Republicans, they were going to repeal and replace Obamacare in 24 hours or on the first day. They're discovering they can't do that because it'll be a political catastrophe to throw 20 million people off their health insurance. It'll be a political catastrophe to dismember the system so that pre-existing conditions can once again prevent people from getting health care. It'll be a political disaster if they reimpose or let the insurance companies reimpose lifetime limits. So they're now talking about it taking a whole year to do this, and they're also talking about repeal and repair, whatever that means. I think what it means is you leave a lot of Obamacare in place, you just change certain aspects of it.
Interesting debate coming up on one of the networks. You've got Senator Cruz and Senator Sanders who are going to do a square-off debate. I believe it's on CNN. That's really the best weapon the Democrats have right now, is to go after Trump and his vulnerabilities and stay aggressive and keep talking to the American people. I mean, the Democrats are down to town hall meetings and voter registration. That's really what it's going to take. And, of course, you got to raise a bunch of money. And the filibuster. I mean, what other strategy could there be?
Well, they have one other advantage, which is apparently these Republican members of the House, when they're holding their town hall meetings, are having a very difficult time because people are coming out and saying, what do you mean you want to do this? We don't want to do this. And, of course, down the road, Paul Ryan is going to want to privatize Medicare and change Social Security. And I don't know that Trump will go along with that, because if he does, it will hand the Democrats a potentially lethal weapon for the midterm elections.
Yeah. Bob Shrum, always great to visit. Thanks so much. Hope you're doing well.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Bye.
You bet. Bob Shrum, Democratic Strategist, Professor at USC. Lionel joins us when we come back. We talk about the legislative, or should we say the legal ramifications of some of the executive orders that have been delivered when it comes to immigration and the legal fight that unfolded over the weekend. That's next. Stay with us. This is Ed Schultz, News and Commentary.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
I don't know if the president got in any rounds of golf this weekend or not, but he was watching the Super Bowl. You know, it's interesting that everybody thinks that his wife is just horribly unhappy and trapped in this marriage because of facial expressions. That's the hot thing that's out there. They got a picture of her watching the Super Bowl, and she didn't look like she gives a damn about football. Maybe if it was a soccer match, she might like it. I don't know. But, of course, the people take it a step further and say, well, she's trapped in a marriage. Free Melania. That's it. That's what we're seeing on Twitter a lot. In the meantime, the president has struck the nerve of several judges across the country and knocked down his immigration ban. And this is starting to bubble up in a couple of states, especially one of the state of Minnesota, where I am broadcasting from this day. Lionel, legal and media analyst, joins us. Lionel, good to have you on. You attorney, how are you?
Finer than frog hair.
Have you been judging any facial expressions of the First Lady? Want to comment on that first?
You know, Ed, just when I think I've heard that we have exhausted every absurd interpretation of Trump, and by the way, I just always have to tell somebody, I didn't vote for him. I'm always defending him. I voted for me. I'm serious. I'm reacting to the absurd statements in the media, and I'm sounding like a Trump advocate, but I'm not.
I get it all the time. Yeah,
I'm just a rational interpretation advocate.
Liberals are so pissed off right now in America. If you even have an inkling, or if you put out any kind of morsel of information that's even objective or even leaning to Trump, you just get absolutely crucified on every social media platform that's out there. And I laugh at these people are crazy.
You know, Ed, one of the things that you just said, and I always qualify this, these are not liberals or progressives or lefties or Marxists or communists or anything. These are anti-Trumpers. You know, there's gravity, anti-gravity, there's Trump and anti-Trump. When you talk about people who are of the proverbial historical left, the proud left, regarding many, many issues that I proudly subscribe to myself. That's not what we're talking about here, because while we're talking about Melania's facial expressions and whether Putin is a killer, well, I mean, these nonsense stories, the Democrats are wasting their time and trying to find some mass traction, actual platform to try to bring back, to address middle America, working man. Whether you like it or not, whether anybody likes it, Trump has actually spoken more to what Americans care about through TPP, shuttered factories, unemployment, than the Democrats ever have. And they still will not get with the program. Now's your chance. Articulate a platform. Be Democrat. Stop merely being anti-Trumpers.
Well, the best Democrat or best progressive out there is Bernie Sanders, and the establishment doesn't want to follow him.
Well,
and Bernie's still doing town halls. Bernie's going to be on a TV debate. He's been in Michigan. He's been in several states. Checking the pulse of the people, and that's really where the Democrats or the liberals have got to be going through all of this.
Ed, with all due respect, and I love you to death, and I love Bernie, but had he not caved in to the evil queen, I'm sorry, he might have been a formidable foe.
He thought,
Donald
like
Trump.
Everybody else, she was going to win.
Well,
he was told by Schumer, get in line, or you're not going to be chairman of the budget committee.
Well, let me also tell you something. Doesn't it sound like the Falcons last night? Doesn't it sound like when they said, "Listen, that's it. Hey, Brady, forget it, man. It's over." Call it. It's done. Stick a fork in it. Go home. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. But, Ed, I just wanted to say something. In this froth and hysteria right now regarding immigrant bans and the like, I want to tell you something, a couple of things here that are very, very interesting. I want you to know that if you and I tried to protest at an airport for a host of reasons, you and I would be cracking rocks upstate. We'd be in the Gray Bar Inn in the Pokey so fast. Do you know what would happen if we tried to protest at an airport post 9/11? Do you know what happened? Do you know, remember in 1991 or 92, even the Hare Krishnas were verboten and approved by the Supreme Court that they couldn't hand out literature and that sort of thing. They said specifically that historically the airports have always been removed from places of public protest. They were always the first site of the coup. Historically, nations had this kind of an off basis of verboten aspect to airports. How was it that there were these protests so quickly amassed, so quickly organized, with no resistance whatsoever from anybody, police, local, that said, "Sure, you want to protest? Knock yourself out." Nobody caught this. Nobody in the media specifically realized airports are no protest area. You don't go to the airport. You don't. This is almost quasi-military. So right off the bat, to have areas with ACLU lawyers, cordoned off areas where you can go and speak, and law enforcement and federal authorities saying, "Come on in, here, welcome." This was so bizarre. It was immediately organized so quickly with such little resistance. And how many times, Ed, have we heard? Remember recently with that in Fort Lauderdale? Why wasn't there any security? How did that guy grab that gun? Do you know what would have happened if anybody just walks on in, shows up at an airport with a bunch of people screaming and yelling? The potential for all types of, I don't even want to think about it, inconceivable carnage. Have you thought about that? Who gave the okay to this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say inside job or any of that kind of stuff, and I know people hate that, but if I didn't know better, I'm saying, as we say in the South, that dog don't hunt.
That's right. All right, so who's going to win on the immigration ban? Are the federal judges going to win, or is the president and the executive branch going to be able to see this through?
No, I think this has been doomed. It was so poorly handled By the way, Judge, and it's not the federal judges that are going to win. It's us. It's supposedly justice in the United States. This was so poorly worded, so poorly executed, and many of the people are actually attaching it in the TROs, the temporary restraining order motions and petitions. They're actually using the words of Giuliani and others, calling this a Muslim ban, and the administration saying, well, we do have exemptions for Christians. It's like, wait a minute, you just said this had nothing to do with religion. So this could have been done, Ed, had it been called, for example, immigration moratorium, delay, something a little bit more artful. If I didn't know better, and if I wasn't as suspicious as I am, I would have thought that this was somehow phrased in such a way that it would force the courts to act accordingly so that Trump can then turn around to Middle America and say, see what happens when I try to help you? See what happens when I try to make this country safe? You see what I need your help. They're up against us. I mean, think about this. He's not going to take this sitting down. Most Americans, Ed, remember, as you know, the left and the right code, I mean, people that we know in the media elites, they look at it one way. But when you go to Fargo or Collinsville, Illinois, or Thanota-Sassa, Florida, and you ask folks, what do you think about the federal government doing something to tighten immigration? They'll say, well, of course. And
yeah,
the
they're all for
front.
it. Absolutely. They're all for it. But this has spiraled out of control. It wasn't very well thought out. And now we don't even know if it's legal. So we'll see where it all shakes out. Lionel, we'll see you tonight. Good to visit. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
All right, buddy.
Lionel, media analyst and legal analyst for RT America. I'm Ed Schultz. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Back with you tomorrow.